Chapter 3. In spite of. Resentment. I gave that clerk a piece of my mind, reports a dissatisfied customer with apparent satisfaction. He burns me up, says the clerk about the boss who demands she considers unreasonable. Then I blew up, admits the boss as he tells his wife about the day at the store and describes the final and climaxing bottleneck. Now I'm so mad at Bill I can't see, says 12-year-old Jim. Well, I could murder him, many of us said thoughtlessly when irritated beyond measure with one individual. The surprising things about all these careless statements is that they are true. We say, I'll give her a piece of my mind, and that is exactly what we do. We give it to a disgruntled person something so rare and precious that it cannot be purchased with money. When we say of someone else, he burns me up, that too is psychologically correct. Anger takes poison into the blood and burns up the cells. It sets the body on fire. It carries destruction to everyone within its reach, for anger is a form of insanity. The words "I blew up" describe an emotional state that sends a death impulse to every nerve, tissue, and muscle in the body. The speaker wanted to blast the other fellow, but it took him 36 hours to get rid of the poison generated in his own body by his one blow-up. He was like the sadistic farmer that Stanley Jones tells us about, who tied a stick of dynamite to a hawk, lighted a fuse, then turned it loose, expecting it to blow itself up in midair. Instead, the hawk flew to his barn, and the explosion wrecked the barn. Jim, too, was telling the truth. Blinded by anger, how could he see? How could he have vision of any sort, physical, mental, or emotional? Murder springs out of murderous thought. If there were no murderous thoughts, there would be no murder. Literally speaking, the one who says, "I could murder him," really wants the time to murdering some of the finer things within himself. But one of the risks that the sorehead runs is that he may actually harm another. Louis Gay Balsam presents some startling and pertinent facts. He says, I have interviewed more than 600 persons involved in major traffic accidents. They range from laborers and clerks to professional persons and millionaires. I met them at home, on the job, courtroom, jail, clinics, hospitals. With just 11 doubtful cases, less than 2%, these people had two frightening things in common. All were deeply unhappy before the accident, and all remembered this unhappiness coming to a head or an explosion a few hours before the smash-up. What has blowing one's top or seriously upset feelings got to do with automobile smash-ups? That's what I combed jails, courtrooms, and hospitals to find out. A row with a foreman. The speaker was burned up. A quarrel between a husband and a wife. The wife became blind mad. Gambling losses, disappointment, and love are recognized by the individuals involved as the basic cause of fatal or near-fatal automobile accidents. Balsam concludes that the overwhelming percentage of accidents come to people who have met bitter disappointment, usually that very day. Auto accidents and bruised egos go together. It is as simple and as terrible as that. What could any of the individuals reporting to Balsam have done in spite of the circumstance? What can the truth student do when the human factor takes over in a personal equation? He knows definitely that a change must come to him, to his emotional attitude, to his state of mind. What is there so big, so powerful, so effective that it will produce a change? None of these things move me, said St. Paul, and so does the person who has committed himself to the search for truth. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. A sense of detachment from the immediate source of worry and resentment accompanies the deliberate effort to realize that the age-old truths are true today, that they are personal, that they await only individual recognition and realization, to become the motivating, activating, triumphant power, or force or factor, if you will, in the life of the awakened seeker. Jesus said, You have heard it said by them of old time, Thou shalt not kill, and whosoever shall kill shall be in danger of the judgment. But I say unto you, that whosoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Do you see that anger and resentment always do more harm to us than to the objects of our hatred? It is a law of the boomerang. It is the truth in the old saying, chickens come home to roost, and like attracts like. The body is made for serenity and not tension. The mind is made for peace and not confusion. Life is made for love and not hate. The resentful person sells himself down the river. Anger disrupts everything in his life. Hate throws everything out of balance. It affects adversely every organ, nerve, and tissue in the body. The resentful person destroys himself just as surely as if day by day he drank small doses of arsenic. Anger is slow suicide. If you hate, you will be hated. What you send out will return. If you dislike people, they will dislike you. Wrath is a two-way poison. If you express it, it will burn you up. If you repress it, it will blow you down. Closely allied to resentment is malice. If love is the most wonderful thing in the world, malice, which grows out of resentment, is the most terrible. Malice is anger and resentment in concentration. It is vengeance and wrath ready to strike. It is the venomous desire to do harm. It is the deadly cobra in ambush. Crystallized malignity and wrath, that is malice. Resentment is truly an emotional bottleneck. Progress stops, motion ceases, action is impaired when resentment becomes the motivating force. Said a member of my congregation, "I have done everything about my stiff leg. I have prayed, but it does not heal." "Have you any resentments?" I asked her. "Yes," she replied. "I hate the doctor who made the mistake in setting my broken hip." "Do not pray any more," I said, "until you get rid of your resentment." She finally made the surrender and was healed. If you want to know what Jesus would do in a situation of this kind, listen to his words. "So, if you remember, even when offering your gift at the altar, that your brother has any grievances against you, leave your gift at the very altar and go away. First be reconciled to your brother, then come back and offer your gift." Why is prayer unavailing under indignation or rage? Because these emotions not only shut out your brother, but shut out God. Leave your gift at the very altar and go away. That is pretty strong language. It means to stop all prayers and church-going until you have squared things with your brother. Resentment not only delays healing, but produces disease. It produces disease because it is made of our very life substance. Anger heats our blood, wrecks our health, destroys our peace, shadows our nerves, and nettles our sleep. We hold resentment against friends, neighbors, relatives, business associates, employers, and parents, and at the end result is conflict, inner decay, neurosis, muculosis, varicose veins, blurred vision, digestive troubles, split personality, and ulcers. Silly, isn't it? Being resentful is just like playing the game of life with loaded dice. Instead of the winner over the object of our resentment, we cheat only ourselves. In an orderly, harmonious, and well-tuned mind, there is no place for animosity, antagonism, bitterness, condemnation, grudges, grievances, or resentments. But you say, "I cannot be a human doormat. I just can't let people walk over me. If I don't retaliate, people will think that I'm weak." Oh, will they? Did you ever see a chamomile plant? The more people walk on it, the faster it grows. So it is with the soul. The more you return good for evil, the faster the soul grows. You become what you return. You keep what you give, whether it be good or ill. Consider what happens on the plane of human resistance. A man assails you, and personality says that they must defend yourself. So how do you go about this? You organize an attack by using invectives of hatred, criticism, unkindness, and sarcasm. The eye for an eye philosophy says that you muse using physical force or stinging, hate-filled words and repaying wrath with wrath. Oh no, personality never stops to count 10 or to consider whether there is a more effective way to meet mental violence. It just lets go with all the vitriol it can muster. The ego has been attacked and it demands satisfaction. The adversary becomes more and more violent, returning blow for blow. Like a ball thrown against a wall, hate returns with the force with which it is sent. Resentment always follows this pattern. 1. The victim feels he's been wronged in some way. 2. He is impelled to strike back before it is too late. He feels he must seek vengeance while there is still time. 3. He meets mental or physical violence by allowing the baser animal instinct to rule. Fear, praise, uncertainty, and security goad him on. 4. He feels that his resentment is a necessity, that he lets himself down unless he inserts himself in response to what he sees in the situation. 5. The law of the boomerang works. With whatever measure ye meet, it shall be measured to you again. There is, too, a pattern for meeting resentment, for diminishing it to the point of its disappearance, for sublimating it, for turning it to good, for opening the bottleneck it has created. Steps in breaking the bottleneck of resentment. 1. Realize that no one can hurt you but yourself. Be still and know that I am God. Peace, power, love, truth, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, justice, joy, and plenty. Know that harm comes to you from your adverse reaction to a situation, from your failure to recognize your spiritual brother in the person who offends and not from what is happening or from what an individual does. Resentment is a problem of the ego. If a man's ego is under control, he is impervious to resentment. You can call him anything you will, but you don't really disturb him. Accuse the average man of being a cheat or a liar, and he will tell you vigorously that you have got him all wrong. But speak the words cheat and liar to an egotistical man, and he will tell you that he hates you. When the ego gets in front of Christ, it screams. Do not allow disgruntled people to determine your attitude and reaction. If the other fellow has a chip on his shoulder, what is that to thee? Follow thou me. You are to conquer, Lao Tzu said, as does a stream when it reaches a rock. It goes around it, and when strong enough, overflows it. Just remember that the gossip, the cheat, the slander, the liar, scandalmonger, are what they are because of the evil influence and unfavorable circumstance that have played upon their lives. Mental violence is the only weapon they know. You can rise above them, seeing them as God made them. Until they discover the power of love, they cannot be anything else. To love your enemies, as Jesus commanded, means to dissolve the hateful, bitter, critical, antagonistic thoughts within your consciousness. We do not overcome our enemies by saying that we have none, but by changing the states of mind that created the enemies. We do not deal with enemies per se. We work with the embodiment of our confused ideas. It is not the person we hate that disturbs our health and peace of mind, but the mental act of hating. When your opponent seems to have the upper hand, disarm him by refusing to function on his level. He is probably not ready for your new attitude and may have to be given time to learn. Your conduct will convince him that there is a power greater than hate and that it can be used by man. When Jesus met resentful people, he turned the other cheek. That is, he turned away from the disagreeable and hateful in the person and beheld him as he were as God. You can do the same thing. You may kid yourself into thinking that hatred is justifiable, but while you are deluding yourself, you are destroying yourself too. The reasons for your resentment may seem very real, but if it were not for your self-centeredness, you could not even entertain the thought of resentment. When you are God-centered, there is nothing for resentment to act with. Number 2, forgive your enemies. Consider each person from whom you feel the slightest resentment and forgive him for everything. It doesn't make any difference what an adversary may have said or done. You should heed St. Paul's words. You should rather forgive him and comfort him. Why is forgiveness so necessary to the maintenance of mental and physical health? Because it keeps one in spiritual balance. To forgive everybody for everything at all times is to keep ourselves free. When we forgive another, we are doing much more for ourselves than we are for him. Simply say, I do not entertain resentment toward any man, because in so doing, I am recognizing resentment within myself. And in God consciousness there is no resentment. The love of God in me bears witness to the love of God in every man. When Abraham Lincoln was taken to task for forgiving an enemy, he said, Our business is to get rid of this one by turning him into a friend through forgiveness. And how many times shall I forgive my enemies? Asked Peter. Until 7 times? Jesus replied, until 70 times 7. In other words, keep forgiving until resentment dies. When Jesus gave the command, do good to them that hate you, he made it clear that we have a spiritual responsibility for our antagonist as well as for ourselves. No matter how vicious, slanderous, or unkind an enemy have been, Jesus said that you must do something good for him. Well, what? Shall we throw our arms around him and go tripping down the street? No, that is not what Jesus meant. To eliminate an enemy, he pointed out that we must change our consciousness. Instead of seeing him as he appears, we must see him as he is, a unified spiritual being. The question is not, how can I get even with this bird, but what can I do to save him from himself? A man's foes shall be they of his own household, said Jesus. Does that ring a bell within you? What about the foes in your mind? What about all the people that you think have harmed you, friends that have disappointed you, relatives that have failed you, confidants that have betrayed you, partners that have cheated you, competitors that have undersold you, rivals that have double-crossed you, enemies that have lied about you, bosses that have lorded it over you, associates that have disappointed you, and superiors that have interfered with your progress? How have you been handling them? Don't bother to make a reply. I can see the answer in the lines of your face, the carriage of your body, and the dark circles under your eyes. They shriek, poison, 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 self-administered. Hate feeds upon hate. It takes two to make a quarrel. What happens when the hated prays for the hater? The hate falls apart and harmony is restored. The one force that cannot be resisted is spiritual. A man's foes shall be they of his own household. Early in the ministry, I resented a certain man strenuously. It was an act of hatred that never let me go night or day. He became my one great obsession. He was with me 24 hours a day, even though he lived 200 miles away. This man was bound to me as if he were handcuffed to my wrist. Where is this evil power coming from? Why can't I shake this personality and get it out of my life forever? Then came the answer. You are bound to this man by a cord of your own thinking. Loose him and let him go. I discovered that I was holding this man to me by my own hatred. 3. Accept the promise. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. Acceptance of this truth relieves us of the necessity of resentment. We do not have to get even with an enemy. God has already taken care of him for us. The judgment is made even before the antagonist comes out to get us. Yes, even the debtor who takes refuge in the statute of limitations is covered. Not one jot or tittle shall be removed until the law is fulfilled. He who takes anything by subterfuge or cunning, whether it be the peace and happiness of another, his money, or his goods, will in time pay the uttermost farthing. This law is relentless and untiring. It never fails. Human adroitness and cunning try to evade but never succeed. It doesn't make any difference whether you get a bus ride without paying or refuse to fulfill a pledge of money to the support of the work of the church or any other good cause. You will sometime, somewhere, lose that much and usually much more. It may be taken from you through some other unexpected demand, but the law is exact and impersonal. Jesus said, resist not evil. Spiritual resistance is more than non-resistance. It is resistance on a higher level. The non-resistant person does nothing about his adversary except to rise above him. That is, he harmonizes with higher powers that no enemy can effectively resist. When one person in a quarrel ceases to be actively resistant to the other, the quarrel is dissolved. Fire cannot burn without fuel. Would you resist God, who is the only presence and power in the universe? Then why resist one of the children? Hate, like all negative emotions, is a mask or persona of personality. Now forget your pride and look through the mask of the true being of your antagonist. Can you fight what you see there, the inner reality? No, why not? Because the inner reality is Christ. Vengeance is mine, I will repay. When we recognize this law and use it, we can solve all controversies by laborless activity. We can bless those who curse us and do evil against us. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. This is the pattern by which we live without loss. 4. Render unto God the things that are God's. Nothing has to be done on impulse. The measurement of time is a man-made device, for 1,000 years are in thy sight, but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. But, beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. Stop ascribing power to persons, places, circumstances, or things. If God is the only power, why do you recognize hate as power by resisting it? Don't you realize that evil in any form has no power except that which you give to it? Then why exaggerate and strengthen evil by trying to destroy it? When will you learn that power belongeth unto God? Resistance destroys and scatters power, but love generates it. Would you keep your mental machinery well lubricated? Would you keep friction at a minimum? Then use the oil of love generously. Spiritual resistance is not following the line of least resistance. It is making yourself a good conductor of power and seeing the truth of people and circumstances despite their appearance. It is a recognition of the spiritual law by which they may live in peace, plenty, and happiness, despite the evidence of bottlenecks of many and various kinds and of sordid sizes. End of chapter.